Have you ever noticed that the 90% of us black people, in particular those of us who live in the Western world, shave our heads? If not, it's our women wearing weaves or fake extensions. But what is saying, what does it represent? Because if you were to take a single hair strand from your head, you would see that's in a form of a spiral. If not, it's completely, and this spiral would turn in a form of a complete circle. And it's black because our hair is black. So what does this all mean? Because we all know, or some of us know, that black is an emblem of infinity, so is a cycle. And so since we all know that the hair represents a crown and that nothing in nature happens for an accident, or everything happens for a reason, doesn't this tell us that our hair is a representation of our infinity, or in other words, our divinity? Because we seem to be the only nation on this earth which happens to have these forms of hair strands. All other nations have straight hair, and in particular white people even have blonde hair. So that if you look into nature, you will see spirals everywhere. For instance, I will show you my fist. If you hold it like this, you are seeing a spiral, in the same way as you will see in a snail, galaxies, and almost everything else. And we all know that the universe is a sphere, or spherical, with its galaxies and planets, and the universe itself is black. And so this tells us that black is a color of infinity, or the color that allows all other colors to exist. Some other one might even say that black is not a color but the source of light, or the mother of all colors. And we happen to call ourselves black people. So in this case, one will associate black with infinity or divinity. And so where does it come from for us to shave our head, or to have little respect for our identity or nature as it is? Because if you were to put a black rod through a furnace, you'll see an array of colors, the entire spectrum of the rainbow. Because the first color which you will be able to produce would be red, which will eventually turn into yellow as the color, or as the heat progresses. Then the steel will be blue, green, orange, purple, and ultimately violet. Likewise, we too have chakras down our spine, and these have these 7 colors. And the reason why we have black bodies is because as much as we see this physical world with our brains, and these brains see it through the eyes, the pineal gland, which is the top or the center or the main chakra, or the main gland in our bodies, happens to be the eyes of the spirit. And these 7 chakras are also the senses of the spirit. In other words, one would say that the mind is divided into 2, the spirit as well as the soul. And the soul would say that it's a tiny reflection of the spirit, which develops from earthly experiences. In other words, if you were to incarnate in any dimension, your knowledge of that dimension would shape your character as well as your personality. And this in turn is referred to as the soul. What is the driving force behind it all? The infinite intelligence which underlies all existence, which is collectively present in everyone else and is ultimately the same, is what we all know as a spirit or God. And so now, if we were to understand this, we'll know that by shaving our hair, we're actually cutting our connection to as many dimensions as possible, because we said that the soul develops from us incarnating in a particular dimension. Suppose one would want to connect with many other dimensions beyond a particular dimension in which they happen to exist. So how can this be possible without us having hair? Because these 7 chakras and our dark bodies were meant for a purpose. Because for light to be visible, it has to travel through darkness, such as sound needs silence in order to be heard. One might even say that silence is a muted sound, in the same manner that darkness can be considered invisible light. And so for us to be able to penetrate deeper dimensions which are invisible to us, we have to be able to use these 7 chakras. And our 7th chakra, being the crown chakra, is what allows the spirit to perceive as multiple dimensions as possible, in the same manner that our brains, or the same spirit, perceive this reality through our brains, as well as the rest of our senses, which collectively feed back to the brain, which gives the spirit a feedback of what's in this world and how to interfere or interpret events within it. So suppose, as I was saying, these 7 chakras were open or active in us. they would glow and give us what is known as an aura. An aura is a reflection of their light, their collective light. And this aura would appear in the form of a rainbow. If not, it only consists of the three primary colors. And these are also in turn collected by our heads, or excuse me, our hair, because we all know that the hair is electromagnetic, as well as contains or can conduct static electricity. So in the case of electromagnetism, we know that electricity refers to light, and light is life. And magnetism refers to attractions as well as repulsion. So this means that we have the ability to, through our intelligence, to attract worlds as well as repel them, in the same manner that we exist in a highly vibrational reality. But we do not see these realities because our minds are locked in one dimension, in one perspective, so much that nothing exists in a stationed environment. Everything vibrates. But given that our minds were able to see these vibrations, we'll also be able to see multiple other worlds beyond this one. A simple experiment concerning this, which I would like to explain further, would be if you were to put a fan in a dark room, and you will place a sticker on that fan and take a strobe light which flickers 1,000 times per second. Supposedly your fan would spin 1,000 times per second, and then you will turn off your strobe light as well as your fan while turning off the lights. The illusion you would see is that the fan or the dot on the fan will suddenly appear to be still, even though it's moving or rotating or revolving at 1,000 revolutions per second. So the idea behind this is for us to understand the message hidden in our hair, because we all know that the universe contains golden ratio. This golden ratio being the expansion of consciousness, which travels in the form of spirals. And these spirals are present in our hair because the hair will initially begins from a certain area within your head, and it will revolve around your head. To some people, it might start from a certain part around the back of their heads and spirals across the entire head. And yet a single strand will be an entirely spherical, if not a spiral. And so in this case, a spiral represents a continuity of the divine, or we might say that the divine being in a state of progression, because a cycle represents a confined divinity or confined space. For a cycle to expand, it might expand outwards in the form of vibrational energy. Likewise, if you were to throw a stone on a lake or on still water, you would see radiation, or I would say a wave, which represents the central point of impact. So in the case of us human beings, the reason why black people have these unique hair strands is because we are the divine race which started it all, or are the manifestation of God on earth. And the most unfamiliar or unfortunate thing is that all other nations know this, but are waiting for us to wake up and explain as to why we created them in the first place. Suppose a farmer would tend to imitate his own animals, say in this case pigs as well as goats. Do you think that they would be happy with that? Or what would be the condition if the farmer would relegate his own duties and pretend to be one of the animals? And so the rest of the nations on this earth will never respect nor like us until we mature, because they know the truth about that. And the whole entire system and governments are a conspiracy designed to prevent us from awakening in consciousness. Because if we were to do so, we'll be able to attract those dimensions which are locked within our consciousness. And when this does happen, it means that those whose pineal glands are shut, in other words, are inactive, or can no longer or cannot perform at our peak due to the levels of melanin, because we all know that light depends on darkness. And for this pineal gland to be functional, it needs complete, or I would say full amounts of melanin. And so in this case, the darker the body, the higher the or the levels of melanin, and the deeper the consciousness can go. So with all this being said, blacks are the manifestations of God who happen to insult their own divinity due to their own ignorance. And this ignorance is not only a matter of chance, it's deliberate and a form of brainwash. You have to also remember that blacks were once enslaved. And when you enslave a person, you won't even give them time to work on their heads or hair or symbols of pride and divinity, such as in our case. So the reason why we're in these conditions today and we're spending lots of money on hair and beauty is because of self-hate. Suppose we were to change our attitudes and spend this money on something positive and constructive, one would say that we'll be able to build cities and thus develop a civilization the world has never seen, because within our minds are infinite realities and the potential to create a greatness that the world can never perceive. But we need to grow intellectually and become different beings in order to achieve that. And I thank you for your time, and I hope we can start rethinking our orientation as well as our identity as a nation, because collectively we are one manifestation of the same being. Some of that individuality is an illusion.